Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamey Daddy channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today we're going to have a short discussion, or maybe a discussion that could span a long time, because once we start talking about the Division, man, it's over. There's so much that this game has to offer. And this video, what I'm going to try to do is give you a picture of Tom Clancy's The Division 1, the first game in 2016, that was its release date. I'm going to try my best to give you a snapshot of what the game looks like in 2021. So kick back, relax. If you're driving, just maybe put your phone away. Don't comment on the video. But if you're not driving, let me know what you think in the comment section. And if you enjoy the content, you can hit the like button. So The Division came out in 2016 to an audience of gamers that in many cases, some were really anticipating it, some had never heard of it. I'm in that mindset that I had never heard of the game before. I was not even sure what the game was about, and I remember paying for Battlefield 4 after The Division came out. I was just there twiddling my thumbs, and I was like, oh, I'm going to buy Battlefield 4. Well, hopped into Battlefield 4, realized that I didn't even know what the heck I was doing, and I just said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and take the deep dive and get The Division 1, and that was it. I became a YouTuber because of this particular game. In 2016, it had a lot of its own issues. There were people outside the community that critiqued it, people inside the community that critiqued it. But if you found yourself inside the community, whether you were critiquing or enjoying the game, you were already sucked in. You could have been whining and complaining and still sit in cover, shooting bad guys in Falcon Lost or whatever incursions that you liked to do. And that was the effect of the game. Now, fast forward a number of years after DLCs, after even a sequel has been released, you see that The Division 1 is still a solid game till today. In fact, in some communities, the game is still being played. I remember very clearly that I logged into my PC account, which has almost 1,000 hours of play. Please know, by the way, I played over 1,000 hours on PlayStation before logging in another on the PC platform. And I was able to matchmake with people as well. There were even some of my friends on my Ubisoft Connect account that still continue to play the game at that time that I logged in. And even more recently, I've still been seeing those same friends and those same audience members here in the community who are also friends with me on PC. Some of you are still playing The Division 1. What in the world is wrong with you? Well, I guess the same thing that's wrong with you is wrong with me, because I found myself in a position where I was able to get the Xbox Series X, and I went and got Division 1 on it, and even started to play on the Xbox, because this is the only console I've not been able to step into the Division world, and that is no longer the case. I was able to get myself a Division copy very cheap. It was $5 on Amazon, and I started to play. And once I started playing and talking about the game, it occurred to me that not only was I talking about this game and playing the missions, every time I hit the matchmake button, I would get 1, 2, or sometimes 3 people jump into a mission with me. And I started thinking to myself, isn't this game supposed to be dead? Isn't this game supposed to be in a position where nobody is playing it? How am I in a place where people are reviving me in some of these missions? And it then continued to just dawn on me that The Division is still a thriving game as well in some communities. Now, I'm not saying in every community, but with the unlocking of the 30 FPS to 60 FPS, which Microsoft basically does with their FPS boost capability. Thank you guys for even notifying me and letting me know that this is something Microsoft does without the input of the developers. It appears that many people who had this game installed on their consoles finally got to pick it up to maximize the use of their new consoles. And there was a window where Microsoft was giving this game out, I think, to Xbox Live Gold members. So that also probably increased the amount of people who had never tried the game before to kind of add it to their own collection of games. And then finally, now that they have a new console that can actually take on the capability of rendering and actually playing the game at a higher quality, more people are just playing the game. You will find people in every safe house. You find people at every level. I mean, I'm not talking about the fact that the safe house is maybe trying to burst at its seams. No. This is not the prime time, or these are not the prime days of The Division, but it's still very interesting to see people going out there and playing and enjoying the game. In fact, what really kind of got me just recently is how much I'm now quite interested in playing the game from a whole different perspective. You see, The Division 2 is a robust game. It took a lot of what The Division 1 had and kind of fine-tuned it in a different sense. There's a kind of ruggedity to the Division 1. The Division 1 is like this, interesting piece of art that is done in a very rough way. Whereas in the case of the Division 2, it goes and smoothens a lot of different things out and, kind of turns it into its own thing. So the Division 2, yes, does have a lot of systems and a lot of elements that it does have better than the Division 1, but nothing really beats that original experience that you have as a Division player. Whether you've been playing the game since the very first day it came out, or whether you played the second game first, you still can go back to the Division 1 and say there is something about this game that makes it stand out. And many of us have come to the consensus where we say and we know that it's the atmosphere and the world setting of the game. Now, something that's really cool and really crazy and really interesting is how the Division 1 is a very well written game in terms of its overall narrative. Now, if you play the game and you start the game, it's like, okay, this is the plot of the game. There's this issue that went on, after Thanksgiving of, that year. And before you know, a virus began to spread that basically was a very terrible virus that decimated modern civilization in that part of the world is something that they were seeing. Well, which is something that's really eerie and crazy about it is that we actually got to live through some level of that in 2020, and we're probably still living through some of the effects of that. I think the Division basically had an overemphasized fictional aspect of it, but the Division was written in a very scientific way and is a very interesting game if you go back and look through the narrative again. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get goosebumps if you play that game. Ubisoft, y'all are creepy, man. I don't know how y'all came up with that script and that narrative and that plot in such an early time. Or maybe you guys were looking at some books and looking at some, apocalyptic or post-pandemic type literature being written out there when you guys were constructing the plot and the story for this game, because you guys really made that game way too close to home for 2020 and 2021, which is one of the reasons I made this video, because the characters that you engage, the characters that are talked about, the people who are the protagonists, some people who engaged in some really interesting type of research, which we in our real world are arguing and actually debating its benefits today, actually is mentioned in some of the video logs and some of the files in the Division. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I recommend that you go find yourself a cheap copy of this game and slot it in and maybe just play the game. And this is something that will really shock you as to how very, in a sense, accurate this depiction of our world in 2006 in a 2016 game is today. And what's even worse is, or I would say what's even much more scary or way too coincidental in a sense, is that this game was in development even further down the road. I think the Division had more than likely a 6 to 8 year development phase from the moment the concept was birthed. And so even when that concept was, basically first birthed in terms of the kind of game, maybe they added the narrative somewhere around, I don't know, maybe the 6, 7 year or 5 year mark before game release. And we were able to see all of these elements basically playing out in real time. So these are some of the elements so far in terms of narrative, the elements in terms of community, in terms of some of the reasoning behind even myself jumping into the Division. But then there are also other things like gameplay and mechanics, which I feel like is going to be important in a discussion like this. So what is the gameplay of the Division like? The Division is a third-person, cover-based looter shooter. That is one of the best ways that you can just explain the Division if you're going to just give somebody a quick brief statement about the game. And it's a game that I've realized that many people in my immediate friend circles don't easily pick up and understand the reason behind. In fact, when I'm telling my friends about the game, they're like, oh, maybe it's just them. It's not necessarily the fact that it's the game. I know it's them. And I'm going to make sure I send them a link to this video so that they can know that I'm actually speaking about them. But you guys here in the community, you've picked up this game and you guys are awesome for doing that because the mechanics appeal to you. It has a third-person character system, a wonderful camera, and the shooting mechanics are, in my opinion, one of the better shooting mechanics in any third-person game that I've played. And the shooting mechanics not only allow for you as the player to just continue to fire your weapon and, try to hit shots that are relevant, you have to consider the RPG nature of the game. You as the character will have to invest your time in making your player stronger. Those bullets are going to be hitting enemies that are going going to be getting stronger and stronger. And so, yeah, you may have to put more bullets into the enemy before the enemy can go down, or you can make yourself powerful in fun ways that you can make that process much easier. And again, we may find ourselves in a situation where people have said, oh, these games that make enemies too tanky, that are shooters, we don't really like them. And I can understand, some people want to be able to realize some of those realistic elements in a game like this, especially one that looks quite realistic. But here's the thing. A lot of RPG games are designed on the basis that we're going to engage in what we call suspension of our beliefs, in a sense. So those things that make sense, we kind of have to, in a very, very, I would say, intentional way, put them aside, because we're not trying to be idiots, and just say this is just a video game. So think about it this way. An RPG shooter that needs for you to pump a bunch of bullets into a bad guy before they even have their health bar move, in my opinion, is almost akin to you taking a sword and slashing a bad guy 7 times before he actually falls down and dies. And sometimes he's not even wearing an armor. I mean, have we not seen that before, where, you take a sword and you're basically whacking this bad guy and the bad guy is still alive? Oh, wait, check this out. How about being a Jedi and using a lightsaber to pretty much just whack some of the bad guys, and they're still coming to you? When literally, if you take a lightsaber in quote, real life, because the lightsaber is basically a very powerful weapons, and slash any organic, piece of material or any organic matter, it will basically slice that thing off if you watch the real Star Wars movies. But in a game like Jedi Fallen Order, you can just go around just and, before the enemy dies. Now, yes, you don't have to do too much, but it still requires an intentional suspension of belief. The Division requires that you do that, because if not, the game may break your immersion when you get to that point. Now, it's not necessarily the case that you're always constantly going to be shooting a bunch of bullets, like I said, because your character has a progression and many skill trees that you can go and level up, and many tactics and many different gear items and weapon and talent pieces. You can use all of these to your advantage. If you pick up a gun when you reach the max level of gameplay, you're going to figure out and find out that that gun requires you to be able to build to unlock the talents that that gun has embedded in it. So those talents will now give you, as the player, extra possibilities and unlock different play styles for you. This is how the game begins to grow on you, because you start out the game in a somewhat linear fashion, and once you reach end game, all of these different concepts allow for the game to grow into this huge web of possibilities that you can continue to explore. Added to that weapon aspect, you also have gear types. The gear types grant you different bonuses, grant you different abilities as well, that you can use to make what we call builds, which is a combination of these different gear elements. And so these are things that are there for a player to explore in order for them to be able to make the most out of their game. Many people who did not wait long enough to play the Division past the bullet sponge complaint or some of those things could not see any reason why the game was like that. Many of them played other games where the bullet, mechanics and the way those games were designed to basically have a much more realistic feel. So a bullet hits somebody in the head, they're done. You one tap an enemy multiple times. Basically you hit an enemy multiple times, not one tap them. You hit an enemy multiple times and they're down. So coming to the Division, it was a little challenging and difficult for them to be able to understand those concepts. And that's why I think the Division 2 in the marketing, they basically did a lot of hand holding to say, hey, if you're shooting an enemy and the enemy is not, going down, it's because they have armor. And so they had to kind of explain that, because the Division 2 was reaching for a much more wider audience in that sense. But these are some of the gameplay mechanics that if you were trying to engage in the Division 1 right now, would have to, deal with. And so I think what's going on right now is a lot of people are picking up the game, trying to understand the game. And I think because of the drought that we've seen right now, games like the Division and other games that have the capability of pretty much using the maximum capabilities, or at least some of the capabilities of these new consoles, are going to continue to get played, especially the fact that the games were originally designed with a lot of detail. I think what really, shocked me the most with this Xbox FPS boost with the Division 1 is the fact that the developers didn't have to do anything. In my other video, I thought the developers actually had to, basically submit some files or something, but this was just a Microsoft thing saying, okay, now we're just going to uncap the game and make it go to 60 FPS, and this is what we got just from that. The developers haven't necessarily gone in, that I know of, to do any tweaks or, do anything. We just got this, quality of the game. I think that also shocked us with the Division 2 as well. When from console, when we were playing on the PS4 and the Xbox One, and then they unlocked the game for the PS5 as well as the Xbox Series X and S, and we saw that quality as well, and that kind of, basically pushed a lot of people back going, whoa, this is a whole different experience. So the one thing that I would say you can take away from the Division 1 in 2021 is you're in for an experience that you probably have not necessarily had in a different video game. So if you're thinking about playing the game, I would say go ahead and pick it up. At this point, it's already dirt cheap. It's going to provide you a little bit of gameplay fun. If you can get into it, it will basically suck you in. And there are people still in the community that are still playing right now, and some that will be happy to jump in and play. In fact, some of y'all that are here in the community with me, you've been telling me, yo, let's jump in on a few games. And yes, I will hit you guys up. Just add me on the Xbox platform. It's Gamey Daddy as my gamer tag. And when I'm online, or if I see you online, I will hit you up and definitely be happy to run missions with you. Anyways, I hope this video is able to give you some sort of a snapshot of what the Division 1 is in a broad sense in 2021. I could have made a 45-minute video and still not cover much, but I hope this little 15, 16, 17-minute video or whatever it is able to help you just get another perspective and perhaps make you, give the game a try. Thank you very much for listening to the video. I appreciate you guys so much. Talk to you soon. Peace out.